If you're using the Yaesu FT-891 with digital modes, you'll want to check out the Digirig developed especially for the FT-891. Sound cards are a necessity if you're planning on using digital modes. While newer radios have sound cards built in, portable or mobile rigs sometimes don't. Same with internal antenna tuners. The Digirig is a tiny sound card that plugs into your radio and then into your computer for those digital modes such as FT8. The DR-891 version of the Digirig is designed especially for the Yaesu FT-891. As we'll see in a minute, what makes this so cool is you can connect your FT-891 to your computer using the included USB-B cable without having your computer sense two different USB devices. This was an issue with the FT-891 that's now no longer a problem. Additionally, the DR-891 can be used with other radios, but as mentioned on the Digirig website, only if the green socket remains unused. Don't plug any other cable into that one. Hi, and welcome to the Gadget Talk channel, where we do reviews and how-tos on a variety of electronic gadgets that catch my eye. If you find this video helpful, please click the thumbs up button below the video and subscribe to the channel. Click the bell icon to set your preferred notification schedule. I really appreciate it. Older external sound cards like the very popular Signal Link are fairly small but have to be configured for your radio. That means jumpers inside have to be configured, and then there are knobs you can adjust to get the right signal level for your application. One of the many cool things about the Digirig is that those tasks aren't required. You just plug it in and go. Well, more or less. There are some things you need to set in your radio and a couple of things in your computer, but once selected, things will be ready to go very quickly. Many of these things need to be set with other sound cards too, so it's not like they're extra tasks required by the Digirig. There are two cables that come from the FT-891 to the Digirig, and you supply a USB-C cable from the Digirig to your computer. As you'll see in a second, the USB-B cable, think printer cable, goes from the Digirig's green socket to the USB-B port on the radio. The mini DIN cable goes from the DIN socket next to the radio's USB port to the black socket on the Digirig. Both cables are included in the package. Here's a quick look at the DR-891 connected to my FT-891. Here's the Digirig 891 hooked up to the 891. You can see the USB is plugged in the back. It's a separate cable. The DIN plug there plugs in here, and then the output is just USB-C going to my computer. As you can see, the DR-891 is tiny and the connections are easy. Next, let's go through the settings you'll need to set or verify on the FT-891's deep menu system. Now, probably the first thing you're going to want to do is set up the FT-891 with the proper settings for the Digirig and for the computer that you're using that we'll describe here in a minute. So let's start off here with the radio. So we're going to start off here with the deep menus, and we get to that with a long press on the F key. And we're going to start way down on menu number 5. And so we're going to start using this select knob down here, the second one below. And we're just going to roll down through the menus quickly. And we're going to start on menu 5-5. Now 5-5 is the squelch key, and we're going to be adjusting the radio frequency gain or the RF gain when we get to the WSJT-X. And so having it there to start with will just cause you less problems than twisting the knob and then discovering you're adjusting squelch instead of RF gain. So you can see I've got that as RF gain. Our next stop is 5.6. And in 5-6, we want the cat rate. And it doesn't matter what this is, but it needs to be the same with your computer. And so I find it usually works best on this fast rate with modern computers and so forth. So I've got it set at 38,400. Now the next thing is 5.7, and that's the cat timeout timer. And we should have that at 100 milliseconds. And at that point, we are going to jump up to number 8. So we'll scroll forward. So here we are in the deep menus for number 8. 8-1 is the data mode. We want that to be others. 8-2, we want that to be 1500 hertz. The other DISP here, 8-3, we want that to be 1500 hertz. 8.4, we want the other shift to be 1500 hertz. 8.5, the data low cut frequency is off. Data low cut frequency slope is 18 dB. 8.7 is off. 8.8 is the high cutoff slope. We'll use that 18 dB, which is the default again. When we go to 8.9, we want to put our data input, and we're going to be using the rear connection, that USB. So we've got that selected as rear. Number 10, the push to talk select is on the DAKY. That's the pin for the PTT signal. 8.11 is the data out level, and I've got that set to 40. We're setting power a number of ways with this radio, and so we're going to be making some settings here that have to do with the output. And so I've got it set at 40 for FT8. That's plenty. You can go higher if your radio deals with it. Remember that with digital modes, it's like AM or CW, you know, it's broadcasting all the time, and so you want to be very careful with the degree that you've got out so you don't damage your final amplifiers. 35 to 40 should work just fine, 50 if you'd like. And then of course it has to do with your antenna. So if you've got a little QRP antenna for Parks on the Air or something like that, you'd want to make sure that this is set appropriately as well. Number 12, we want the BFO set to upper sideband. And that's the end of our menu number 8 deep menus. And then we're going to go up to 1107. And 1107 is the single sideband BFO, and we want that set on auto. So those are the settings that we want to put in our radio to make the Digirig work best. And coming up, we'll talk about the settings not only within the WSJT-X software, but also some settings that you're going to have to make in your computer. Now, with the radio configure, let's turn to the computer. So the first thing we need to do is get the Yaesu drivers. You might have these if you have other Yaesu radios, but we're going to download the current one for the FT-891 here in this little demo. So we're going to go to the products, FT-891, go to the sales page, go to files, and then we're going to scroll nearly to the bottom, and then we're going to, I use this driver right here, the FT-891 USB driver COM-port virtual for Windows 10 and 11. I'm not using the SCU17, and so I used this particular driver, and I downloaded that. The next thing I did is I downloaded the information on how to install the driver. So we'll take a look at what those files look like when they're downloaded. So here are my downloaded files that I've just downloaded. The drivers are in the zip file, and then the installation is just in a PDF file. And so if we open up the driver window, we see that we've got these folders, and we're going to refer here to our instructions as to which of these files we're going to click on to load these. So we'll go back to the instructions here just real quick. And it's several pages long, but actually there's really only a couple pages that apply for the Windows version that you're using. So we're going to install the COM-port driver on Windows 11 or Windows 10. For Windows 11, we're going to go to this INF. We're going to right click on that as it says. We're going to show for Windows 11, show more options. And then we're just going to click install. And then it's done. At this point, there's nothing more. And all the rest of the manual is for these other versions of Windows. And so that's what I've done to install these. So as with most radio programming software, The first thing then we need to do after we've got those devices or those drivers loaded is to look in our device manager in Windows, go to the ports, and with the radio turned on and plugged in, look and see what comes up. And what we're looking for are the Silicon Labs drivers, CP2105, as you see here. And they come up with two of them with the Digirig. One of them is handling the voice and one of them is handling the data. And we want to remember the two numbers because we're going to use the lower of the two numbers when we start to set up our WSJT-X. And so on my computer, it came up as COM7 and COM8. Your computer will probably be different, so that's fine. Just remember, there's going to be two adjacent COM ports, and you want to make special note of what the lower of the two numbers is. So the next thing in our computer that we need to check is the recording devices. And we're going to do that by going down here to the little microphone. We're going to left click. We're going to open up sound settings. And as I've installed these before, you can see you have to have the FT-891 on and plugged in for these things to show up because it needs to recognize that the particular device is there. From my previous configuration today, it's got set for headphones, but I don't want headphones. I want what I've called Digirig. So I'm going to select that. Now, if I click over here to my Digirig, you can see where it says rename. And when this came up, it came up as a USB audio codec, and I just renamed it Digirig for this particular purpose. And so with the settings, you can rename it or not. But there is something that we do need to look at as we open up and roll down here. So we've got the 4800 hertz setting, that's good. But then in Windows 11, this is one that will sometimes bite you, and that is where it says audio enhancements. And that Windows thinks that you want the best audio for your games or your videos, and so it can offer you default audio effects, but we don't want those because those default audio effects really messes up WSJT-X's ability to decode. So we want the enhancements off. We don't want any digital signal processing on the audio that's going to mess up what's happening here with our decoding in our FT8. So we've got the output settings here. We've got it set to off, so that's great. We're going to go back here and we're going to set sound. And then we're going to go to the input, and we've got Digirig set there, and so that's good. We're going to click on that as well, and it's going to open up a similar dialog. I've renamed it, so that's all good. The audio, we've got 4800 baud. We've got an input volume set. You can play with that to get the best decoding that you want. And then again, we're going to double check that audio enhancements are off so that we don't have any unwanted help from Windows in terms of what it's doing to our audio stream. So those are the primary things here in the sound system that we want to check as we get ready to install WSJT-X and connect it with our FT-891. The last thing we'll look at is the settings for WSJT-X. I'm going to assume that you've already got that installed on your PC or laptop. Take a look at the WSJT-X online help or other YouTube tutorials if you need help there. We're going to begin with just it having loaded and following along with the instructions. You know, the first time you're going to go and you need to configure it. So I'm going to go into my settings dialog box here, and I get this display. And so I'm going to start with my call sign. I've got my grid. You can go to any number of places online to determine your grid square. And then we're going to make some changes here. And you can play around with these. But this is how I have my configuration. So I want a blank line between decoding periods. I want to display down here the distance in miles that it thinks the person I'm transmitting to is, the TX messages to RX frequency window, and then I'm going to show the DX grid here. And you can make changes to these others to suit your needs. In the behavior, I'm going to set the double click on call to set the transmitter enable button, so I don't have to click on transmitter enable. I can just double click on a call sign and it'll start. I'm going to disable the transmit after I receive a 73 from the station I've been in contact with. And then I'm going to, the calling CQ forces the first call. And then I'm also going to allow the transmit frequency changes while transmitting. And again, these behaviors you can deal with as well. So those are the settings in general. I'm going to move to radio, and I use Ham Radio Deluxe. And so in the rig here, if you're just going to kind of use WSJT-X naked, you can select your radio model. They've got lots of radios listed here. If you're going through with ham lib protocol to the radio you're doing, that's fine. FL rig, these are all alternatives, and I'll let you learn about that yourself here. But since I'm using Ham Radio Deluxe, I'm going to keep it on Ham Radio Deluxe, since that means that the inputs that I make here in terms of changing bands and so forth will go to Ham Radio Deluxe. Ham Radio Deluxe will translate that and then make the change on my radio. And then it will also log my QSOs into the Ham Radio Deluxe logbook. So those are some of the radio settings we have. So with cat control with Ham Radio Deluxe, most of that stuff's empty because you've set that there. But here are the things that you can set if you're using the program naked, or if you're using one of the other libraries up here or other radios to make it work. The push to talk, I'm using cat. I've got it plugged into the rear data. I'm using USB, and then split operation is controlled by the rig. And so if I want to test the cat, I can click this and it turns green. And that means the cat control translated through my HRD, and it shows that. And then if I want to test my push to talk to make sure that the other line is working, I can tell, and then it turns red, which means that I can transmit. So now I've got everything set up on the radio. Now, audio, you may have noticed in the display behind me, there's nothing coming in, and that's because these are not set properly. So I'm going to go here, and I'm going to go down, and I'm going to go into Digirig. I'm going to pick that one, and then I'm going to pick my Digirig over here, my USB audio device, and that ought to help because now it's listening to the right set of drivers. I have my reporting. I'm going to prompt me to go to log my QSO. So when the QSO is over, a dialog box pops up, allows me to make some comments and to log the QSO. I've got my PSK reporter spotting turned on, and then I'm using this port and port number and IP address to move that data from the QSO into Ham Radio Deluxe and into the logbook. In frequencies, I can make frequencies. I can make additional frequencies for this. Again, use your time to explore this program separately. And then I added colors. And so I have got basically this light green if there's a QSO in the message, and that means it's a CQ, but I've done it. All these other colors come up, knows that I haven't, because the WSJT-X will keep track of the call signs that I've logged. And so if I get a purple, I know that it's a new ITU zone, new continent. All of these give me news except for this light green, and that's a CQ in the message. And I don't mess with those because most people don't want me in their log a couple of times on the same day or in the same band. And then my call sign, I've got kind of this dusty rose color selected. And if you click on any of these, you can get some dialogues here to make changes to the colors, but I'm happy with this. So when I see dusty rose come in, I know that I'm being responded to. And then there's some advanced things here that, again, we're not going to talk about. So we're going to call this okay, and we're going to close that. Okay, so now we can see that we're decoding. These colors mean there are CQs that I have not answered or have not worked before. And we can see in the waterfall chart up here that there's not a lot of activity going on right now, but we can move things around, kind of go left click here, set the transmit and receive, set the receive over here, and make all these settings. Again, this is not a tutorial for this FT-8 program, but those are just some of the things that you're going to be dealing with. Tuning down the RF gain will allow you to see this pull out. When I first started it up, I had a really high setting and it was bright yellow because it was receiving everything. Now, there's one other thing I want to point out to you, and that here in this column, that is DT, that's time deviation. And you want to be looking for a time deviation that's, anywhere plus or minus 0.4, maybe 0.6. But if the time deviation is greater than that, it's going to have difficulty decoding what it is that you're getting. So here we've got somebody, it's a 1.6 deviation, and that guy might be kind of hard to catch. Now, the way we're going to deal with that to make sure that it's not us that's off is we're going to go down here to the date and time. We're going to right click on that. We're going to adjust date and time. We're going to scroll down here, and then we're going to click sync now. And so it synced the time, and so now we know that our time is right. And so as we look, we've got some of these are coming in at a half a second off, and those are all okay. And now when I'm out in the field, I've got a little GPS dongle that I plug into my computer and a little applet. I've got a review of that here on the channel, and that will allow me to sync my time using the satellite when I don't have access to a network. So there we go. We've got the Digirig plugged in. We've got WSJT working through Ham Radio Deluxe, and we're ready for business. Now that we have the program running, you're all set. You shouldn't have to set all this stuff again the next time you use WSJT-X for your FT8 or other digital modes. What you may have to double check are the sound device settings in Windows and that the time on your computer is still synced. If you use your computer for other tasks, you may have to set other sound devices or the computer may set them for you. I'm talking about input and output devices such as the mic and speakers. The two biggest things that cause FT8 issues that I've run into are the sound devices in Windows and the time setting. As with many things related to computers, if things don't work after making these changes, try closing WSJT-X and relaunching so it reads the newest settings when initializing. If you're using an FT-891 for portable or mobile operations, or even if you're using it for your base station at home, the DR-891 from Digirig is an excellent choice for a sound card when considering moving into the digital modes. We've focused on WSJT-X in this demo, but the DR-891 supports a bunch of digital modes. Basically, any mode that uses analog audio. Thanks for following along. Don't forget to like and subscribe. There's also a join button below the video that will take you to a short video about why you might like to become a channel member. Join me over here for a couple of videos I think you'll like. 73.